Hey, I'm Daniel. Welcome back to Lit TV. Today, we're with author Julia Butler. She's the author of a brand new book, The Last Encore. Julia, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Daniel.
So I'm so happy to have you. And there's a lot to talk about in the book, but I wanted to get to know you a little bit first. You're Russian.
I'm Russian.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to grow up in Russia? Because I don't think that a lot of people watching maybe have experience with that culture.
Well, I had a fantastic childhood in Russia. It was a very good place to grow up. And I was very fortunate to be born into a family of high achievers. My dad was a polyglot. He spoke fluently 9 languages.
Wow.
He was a professor of literature. He translated books. He taught languages at the university. He was also a personal interpreter of Khrushchev, the guy who was responsible of giving Crimea to
Nikita
Ukraine.
Khrushchev.
Yes,
Very nice.
With all this tragedy lately. My mom was a concert pianist, so from the very beginning, I knew no other example but parents who encouraged me to achieve my dreams, parents who kept telling me that sky is the beginning. So my days were led by example of an incredible family, and they would start at 5 a.m. and
Wow.
end at 10 p.m. Russian kids were stuffed with activities, and everything was subsidized by the state, and we could do everything at no charge. So I would start skating at 5 in the morning, then I would go to school, then I would come back and have other classes, and there was really nothing I wasn't exposed to. So it was my natural proclivity to achieve, and I was doing a plethora of different activities throughout the day and had tons of interests. And that really gave me a really good start to challenge myself and to push myself beyond boundaries and try to really reach for the stars and achieve my dreams.
That's awesome. And I think one thing you just touched on there, it's funny to me, I was chuckling inside because I think that maybe one of the positive stereotypes about Russians is that they're very focused, they're very driven, and almost very methodical in their practices, right? So you
Right.
describe getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
doing 5 activities, doing them all very well, and then going to bed at 10, doing it again the next day,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
As opposed to kind of, in many cases, the American upbringing, which is like, okay, you wake up, you go to public school, maybe you play a sport after school and you go to sleep. We don't really have, in our culture, in many cases, a very hard work ethic for younger children. So what you're describing is different, though.
Well, true, but at the same time, there is a payoff later in life.
Right, well, of course.
And we as kids, we were sculpted, we were sort of created to later serve the country. And later in life, yes, that's why.
Is that a negative thing?
For me, later in life, it was.
Huh.
Because when I became a teenager, and I was very rebellious, I was really extremely advanced, it was a big problem for me because I was lacking freedom of speech, I was lacking freedom of thought. I couldn't go and dance with American Marines when they were in
Wow.
town, and that really sort of started dragging me down, and I realized that I couldn't live my fairy tale life that I've imagined the way I've imagined in that country, and that's when I made my decision to live.
So would you say that some of the reportings in the news right now about some of the restrictions that are happening in Russia are accurate? They're talking a lot of times now about censorship of the press and suppression of human rights in different places in Russia. Would you say that's accurate?
I haven't been in Russia for a very long time. I left when I was barely in my 20s, and it was extremely constrictive then.
Interesting.
We couldn't speak.
Yeah. What couldn't you do? Because I don't have any more background in this besides reading in books.
Yeah.
So what couldn't you do as an average Russian citizen?
We couldn't have any contact with foreigners, and in fact, in many ways, Catherine's story in my book
Right.
reflects that reality. We were really persecuted. We were afraid to say hello
Wow.
to foreigners in the country. Moscow was a little bit better, but still, we knew that KGB was on our tail, and we had to be extremely careful. So there were a lot of things we couldn't do, and it was I was was a university student, and I belonged to very progressive circles. And it was extremely restrictive to me. And when I made my decision to leave, I went to my dad, who had quite a successful career. And I said, my dad, I don't see my future in this country. Well, what would you say? Would you support if I left? And he said, yes, I'm giving you all the support. You can live your life the way you've imagined. And even though there were terrible repercussions for him, and he was heavily persecuted after I left.
Can you explain it? Wow, that's what happened.
Well, he lost his job. He had quite a prestigious job. He lost it, and he just had to really step down and move down in his career. But he knew that was coming, and he felt that he already achieved a lot, and he just let me do what I felt right for my life. That's
awesome. So let's kind of skip a little bit forward in the progression. And you came to the States. You did a lot of different things. You were figure skating. You were singing.
I went to Italy first.
You went to Italy first.
Yes.
And you came to the States, and when did you start writing? When did you know that you wanted to be a writer?
I've always wanted to write. In fact, I have masters in literature and languages, and I did write a lot. I translated a lot when I was in Moscow. I translated mostly Scandinavian writers. I helped my dad translating Ibsen into Russian. I translated famous Norwegian writer Ingemar I forgot the name. Torbjörn Egner, I'm sorry, mostly children's books. And I've always had that inclination. I've always kept journals since I was a little kid. And then life carried me away, and of course I had to establish myself in 2 different countries, and I traveled the world. But there's always been a desire in me to write, and I've always been puzzled with a certain happening, certain story in my family's past that I dreamed just put on paper. But for a long time I've been battling, of course, a writer's block, because this is not my mother tongue.
Right.
And it took me a while to really convince myself that I can do it.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, this is your book, The Last Encore.
Yes.
This is a sensual book. It's a romance and erotica novel, correct?
I would not call it an erotica novel.
Maybe that's a little bit harsh of a characterization.
Yes, it is
right?
a sexy book.
Well,
eroticism is part of it because it's a story, it's a love story. And I really wanted to be bold and authentic and describe it with passion. And I sort of surrendered, and what came through to me went on paper. It's just a sexy story, but it's a sophisticated, sensual.
And I read it, and I like it, and I agree with you. The reason why I use the word erotica to classify it is because that's a movement that, at least in the States, is becoming more and more prevalent.
Yeah.
I think it comes and goes in waves and generations. One of our big books this generation has been 50 Shades of Grey. You've probably read the books. Would you say that was an inspiration, or do you think it's just a coincidence?
No, that was not an inspiration. I started reading 50 Shades, and I can't even compare it to this book. I have not finished it. I was really focused on my own writing and did not want any influences. But I think that our minds are so much more open to, are so much more courageous and embracing everything and love in all shapes and forms, that I just felt really comfortable, and I felt that I know this is a book for an open-minded reader. The topic itself and eroticism is you called it, definitely it's for a certain type of mind that is an open mind. And in fact, in my dedication, I write for unbound souls, for seekers and explorers. For me, this book has been an exploration of my own family story, has been an explanation of certain happenings that I questioned throughout my whole life. And in a way, has been a major trial of my own morals and personal biases. So I had to really dig into my own light and dark places and just let my thoughts and feelings come through.
Interesting you mentioned that. I think a lot of people, a lot of readers would probably agree with you in that to read a sexy book, to read something that's for more open-minded individuals, you have to have a certain amount of free thinking going into the book, correct?
Absolutely.
And I think that we're getting to a point now where people are more open to reading these types of stories, but can you think of any examples, or can you speak a little bit on maybe why some people wouldn't be open to reading a more sensual story like this? What have you encountered that surprised you maybe?
We all go through love. We are love. We all have intimacy. I don't see what's the big deal. You know, there is a lot of there are some hypocritical minds. There are open minds, and I just don't see what's the big deal.
Well, actually, I'm curious, since you've been in several different cultures now, you lived all over the world. You started off in Russia, which I'm assuming is more of a conservative climate.
Very conservative, yes.
You know, you traveled to
It's in
Italy.
the book, actually. It's in the book. That first story, Catherine's first story, and her relationship is very much, that's why she was so hooked and so attached to this man, because he opened a completely different dimension of lovemaking and passion to her. We were not used to that in Russia. It was extremely taboo. We never spoke about sex. We had no education. We couldn't speak to our parents about sex. So we had to learn things on our own.
So what differences did you notice? What differences did you notice between the kind of the views of Russia towards sex and maybe when you went to Italy, the views? Did you notice any marked differences?
Major.
Yeah?
Yes. First I traveled, I actually got scholarship and I went to Norway, and that's where I completed my master's in literature. So I spent a good 9 months in Oslo. And Scandinavia is extremely liberal. Norway, Denmark, Sweden, sex and lovemaking is discussed. They're really free people. So that was a big discovery for me. And Italy is more conservative.
Interesting. I wouldn't expect that.
Is more conservative, I would say, but it's more conservative on the surface, but underneath there is, I actually found quite a lot hypocrisy there. And in Italy, I saw very few very little loyalty in a marriage, in a relationship. So Scandinavia was more of an eye-opening experience for me. I don't know, I relate to that freedom.
Interesting. Well, let's talk a little bit about the book. Let's dig into it. Can you give us a little bit of background? And I just want to say to the viewers out here, the book is it's pretty close to your personal story in some ways, it seems. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you develop the characters and how some of them might mirror experiences in your actual life?
Yes. The book is inspired by true events, a very tragic story that happened in my family's past. So, of course, a lot of this book is fiction, and there are a lot of similarity between Catherine Conova, the main character, and myself.
I noticed.
You noticed. No, especially that you met me in person. Of course, my blood pulses through her veins, and I drew her. Every character in the book exists. So every character is authentic and real, and there is a person behind it. This story evolved in me. It puzzled me for decades. I could never forget about it. It was a family secret that was shared with me when I was a teenager. And at that time, with all the judgments and condemnation of the family, I had a certain predisposition of judging that story, but yet when I was evolving in my understanding and my perception of life, I always came back to that story, and I saw it every time from a different angle. So about 5 years ago, I stumbled across a certain memoir that really shed light on everything that happened in my family. And I'm in a very difficult situation because I would love to talk about it, but
Right.
yet if I talk about it, I will spoil the twist. So I'd rather the book just came out, and I'd rather gain my reader and my following, and then discuss this whole phenomena that I'm talking about. So after reading that book, things became so clear, and they all settled in such a strong perspective that I told myself, I have to write it. I have to tell this story, and I have to break this stigma of this whole phenomena being a taboo. It has been under wraps for so long, and it's time for it to be unwrapped. It's time to discuss, because knowledge is power, and denial is ignorance. And I just believe that knowing that this exists and this happens all the time is very important for us to move on as a society, and maybe bend our views a little bit, maybe expand our horizons, or maybe help understand and move on with a different kind of understanding.
That's interesting that you talk about using a book as almost catharsis, as almost like a therapeutic tool.
It was a therapy for me.
Do you think that a lot of writers and authors use their work as therapy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's what art is. It has been a personal journey for me, and definitely a therapy. I would get up at night at 4 o'clock in the morning because I'm quite busy, and mornings are usually most productive for me. So I would wake myself up at 4 a.m. and just meditate and ask for the information to flow through me. And on certain mornings, I would just look at the ceiling and nothing would come through. And on other mornings, I would write like crazy on my iPad, and there would be this flow of information and beautiful thoughts, and I would put everything down. So yes, it has been an incredible therapy, and I can't wait to continue working on this story.
You know, I want to kind of point something out. You talked about waking up in the morning, and some mornings you're feeling inspired, and some mornings it's just not there. What I hear from a lot of really successful, prolific authors is that it's easy to write when you're inspired, but it's the mornings when you're not inspired that it's most important to try and get something done. Because I think that a lot of times it's not about writing something great once a week, it's about consistently writing every day. Can you just talk to us a little bit and talk to the readers a little bit about what your writing process is for getting going, especially since you said that you had a little bit of a mental block because English is not your first language,
right?
Right. So how would you get yourself going to kind of pull out of yourself the emotions that you needed to write, especially when you weren't feeling like it?
Daniel, you know, I function differently. I really never force myself. I learned throughout my life to trust my gut and my intuition, and I usually just evolve with the flow. I follow my heart, and if on a certain day it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I'm not going to force myself.
Really?
Yes, I'm not going to force myself.
That's different than what a lot of authors say.
To write something. For me, how I started, just decided to start, and I wrote 3 or 4 nights in a row. I didn't sleep. I wrote on the floor. I was up in Lake Arrowhead in the mountains. It was very inspiring, the nature and everything, and the silence. And then I read it back, and I really thought it was horrible, and I was ready to delete. And then I showed it to my 14-year-old daughter, and she said, "Mom."
You showed this book to your 14-year-old?
No, the beginning. The beginning. No, my daughter has not read it. Okay. The very beginning, the opening, the prelude, because I call my chapters with musical turns, right, because I just really feel that music and word, it all entwines very nicely. So, and she said, "Mommy, really, it's really beautiful." So I started. For me, it was a little bit of a longer process because I had to elaborate on every word and Google a lot of words and use glossary, of course, because I come from a tradition of Russian literature, which is a very rich tradition, and I was very well read, and and I really wanted to shoot at literary fiction. I wanted it to be a literary piece. I wanted it to have literary value. So yes, I caressed every word and every sentence, and it did take me a while to produce this book.
Well, the interesting thing, and this is what I like about fiction, it's that you can go anywhere. So you have a lot of authors who write nonfiction, they write 1 or 2 books, and they've told you everything they know, so now they have nothing else to say. But with fiction, you can explore new worlds every time you write.
Yeah.
This may not be a trilogy, but have you thought about what you're going
Why
to do
not?
next? Well, no, I don't know. I don't know if it is. I don't know if it is.
Don't you think that it lends itself very nicely to a sequel? I can't wait.
Well, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
That's what I want to know. What are your plans?
I don't plan. I evolve. No,
That's a quotable. I don't plan, I evolve. That's a quotable.
Yes, I actually can't wait to get my reader, and I actually can't wait to discuss this story with my reader. I have a tremendous amount of ideas on how it can move from now and on, from the end. There's definitely a sequel coming. I just don't know how it's gonna evolve.
So you do have a desire to continue the storyline.
Absolutely.
Some authors don't, and I think what happens in kind of the modern book marketing era is publishers want you to write books that naturally lend themselves to sequels because they want to bank on a reliable brand, if you will, that you can repeat success over and over again, right? So you say you don't plan, you evolve, but do you go into your writing process thinking, okay, I want to leave a little space open so I can extend this if I need to?
Well, what did you think, Daniel? What did you think when you read the last page?
These are my exact thoughts. My exact thoughts were, why is it ending here? I felt like you specifically ended it with a small piece that could be continued if you chose.
Right. Well, you know, I've given the reader so many
away.
shockers in
Yeah.
the last pages because this novel sort of develops quite slowly, and I give different life stories at the beginning, and they all really come together at the end, and the theme of the Moonlight Sonata, the music, also unites all these stories. So the end is very intense, and I just felt that I had to stop there to give a little bit of a breather, and also to hear my readers' feedback and discuss the phenomena that I can't wait to discuss, because I'm exploring the psychological phenomena, as I mentioned, that is fascinating, that is astonishing and shocking and compelling. And there has to be a discussion. There has to be an open discussion. We have to hear from the people who have experienced those kinds of cases. And with that, with my reader, we will determine together as far as how to shape up the sequel. But I have it in my heart already. And you know, this novel is about stripping the flesh and exposing the heart. And I really put a lot of my own heart and soul into it, and I hope it comes through. I put all my passion and my imagination and my fantasies and. Ooh.
Well, and speaking of
Yeah.
putting a lot into the book, we talked about this briefly before we went on air, but now I'm curious, do you have a favorite piece? Would you like to read something? What's your favorite piece?
What's my favorite? I love every page of the book. You know, what's your favorite piece?
Okay, it's a little
That
bit.
would be more
it's a little bit sensual.
authentic, actually.
So I highlighted the first part that I was reading that made me go, ooh. Do you want to see what it was? Okay.
Ooh.
I'll show you. This is when, so this is Catherine's first experience. This is in chapter 4.
Opus 4. Did you like how I named the chapters with
Yeah.
musical terms?
I like that. I was
Yeah.
actually running out of musical terms myself until I realized that there were more. Okay, so this is my favorite piece.
Say it. No, you read it.
You want me to read it?
it.
Okay,
Yes.
you ready? Okay.
Yes.
So, well, first of all, why don't you outline for us what's happening in Opus? What's happening in chapter 4?
In chapter 4?
Yeah.
What's the title of the chapter 4? Is it Catherine's duet, right?
It's duet, yeah.
It's duet. So the main character, Catherine, who has been through a lot of of dramatic events, lost her beloved mother. She's making a very hard choice for her to quit figure skating. And that was actually my choice that I had to make after a tremendous career and a lot of accomplishments, and to enter conservatory because she saw more future and it just looked more promising, and music was her passion as well. So right at the very beginning of her first year, she is fascinated by her conservatory professor, her piano professor. And this was a very special connection that she made, which evolved into a relationship that haunts her for the rest of her life.
The rest of her life,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I'm going to read, this is one of her first experiences with her professor.
Yes.
His breath was hot and insistent as she felt him slowly subside. Oh wait, no, that's the, okay, that's the. Her breath was hot and insistent as she felt him slowly subside. He carefully pulled out of her and rolled onto his back. He groped for her hand and placed it between his legs, holding it below his exhausted manhood. Catherine thought that he was through, but then he dried her with a tissue and put his mouth on her. She gasped. He blew lightly on her clitoris, teasing her, flicking his tongue across its hood. Then he kissed her tenderly. She climaxed quickly, and she lay on the rug, completely exhausted. He pulled up his pants, straightened his clothing, and replaced the bench. Catherine closed her eyes and listened to him moving around the room. It seemed like a dream she never wanted to end. For the first time in my life, I know what it feels like to be a woman.
You just really went to the
I did.
To the meat, right?
Because that's the part that made me gasp.
Well,
how does it feel to write
Russia,
something like that? Is that hard to write?
You know, I had to. No.
No.
I had to. In Russia, those things were not done. We really never heard about oral sex or this kind of pleasure. So, for a girl of that age, she just turned 18. For a girl who was still a virgin, to experience something like that was really quite unbelievable. So. Oh gosh, you had to read that paragraph?
I did. No, but
why
you know
didn't you read a sonnet or something?
But no, well, the reason why I read it is because
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people, wonder what it takes to write something like that. They think that it would be difficult to write something very emotional and sensual like that, but it's not, right? Because it comes from you, it comes from within.
It comes from me. It comes. Of course, I've lived all those experiences. Of course, I've put myself in those situations.
Right.
So to tell you the truth, there were mornings at 4 a.m. that I would be just sobbing insanely and feeling for my protagonist and trying to figure out how can I get her out of there, how can I rescue her, because the pain, this is such a horrible situation to be in that she finds herself in, that I just really had to live through all those moments in Catherine's life and feel them on my skin and experience every pain and every joy that woman has been through. I'm in love with my protagonist. With all that she's been through, she's just such an amazing woman. She's an inspiring woman, and I can't wait to get back and explore her life further.
Well, that's awesome. I'm curious if you had to leave the viewers with something to think about in terms of your book, or just in terms of coming up with things that are important to them and that touch them emotionally. What would you want them to know?
I would want them to know that I really believe that love conquers all. Will my protagonists be able to move on with forgiveness, with understanding, and will their powerful bond survive in this kind of circumstance? It's still to discover, it's still to establish. But every end is a new beginning, and the last Encore, every time Catherine played or performed the last Encore, it would turn her life in such a wonderful and unexpected way. And after every Encore, there is a new prelude coming. So every end is a new beginning, and I just want my readers to be open to this book. It's not just about eroticism. It's a very powerful story. It's a love story. It's a story about two incredible people brought together through a very intricate conspiracy, and two people who have to overcome incredible obstacles in their relationship. But every conspiracy, every lie usually sees its day of judgment, moment of judgment. So these two characters, I just really vow for them. I just really want them to love each other and be together and have a future. And so I've been thinking really a lot where they stand and will they be able to overcome all that has happened to them.
Well, where can we get a copy?
Right, the book just came out. You can definitely get a copy through my website, which is www.julia-butler.com, juliabutler.com, Amazon, and it's slowly getting into the global reach distribution. The last Encore, Julia Butler. You can Google it and find it.
Fantastic. Julia, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Daniel. Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. And guys
Thank
at home, leave a comment and tell us what you thought of the interview and what you thought of Julia's book when you buy it. Thank you so much. I'm Daniel, signing off.